Hi, I'm Sylvia. She whispered it so softly I almost missed it. Mommy, if I sit down, my private part will hurt. And at that family dinner, they rolled their eyes and called her dramatic. But I saw how she flinched when anyone brushed her shoulder, how she slept in sneakers like she was ready to run. They thought blood ties could bury the truth. Then I found her drawing, and my hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone dialing 911. What happened next tore open everything I believed about family. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? And where? Drop a comment below. I read every word. Now, let me tell you the story that still keeps me up at night. Thanksgiving evening was never meant to feel like a courtroom, yet the second Naomi and I stepped onto Mama's porch, I felt a verdict hanging in the air. The porch light flickered, catching a swirl of frost, and for a breath I wondered if turning around would hurt less than ringing that bell. But Naomi, clutching her stuffed raccoon, whispered, "It smells like pie in there, Mommy," and that was reason enough to walk inside. Years had passed since I brought a casserole to this house. The wallpaper was the same pale yellow, still curling at the corners, but everything felt smaller and sharper, like the walls had listened to too many secrets and grown mean. Mama's hug was quick, her perfume powder sweet and distant. "You look tired, Sylvia. Long drive?" she asked. What she meant was, "Don't start anything." My sister Callista was setting the dining room, crystal glinting under her perfect hair. She shot me the tight smile folks give telemarketers right before hanging up. I tried to shrug off the chill. Naomi's eyes darted across the family she barely knew. Uncle Marcus laughing too loudly, Grandma Vera reminding everyone where to sit, Cousin June chasing gravy boats. Naomi squeezed my fingers, unspoken code for stay close. We gathered around the long cedar table, the same one Daddy sanded by hand before he passed. A century of blessings had been spoken over that wood, but tonight the grain looked bruised. Naomi was told to join the two younger cousins at the far end. She hesitated, twisting the hem of her sweater. I nudged her chair out, but she leaned toward me instead. "What's wrong, baby?" Her voice came out thinner than a breath. "Mommy, if I sit down, my private part will hurt." The sentence was too delicate for the room. It shattered anyway. Time slowed, sounds warped. My fork slipped, clanged against the plate. Marcus barked a short laugh. "Drama runs in that side of the family," he said, waving a buttery roll like a gavel. Mama cleared her throat. "Naomi, manners. Sit up straight. Sylvia, she needs firmer boundaries." Everyone resumed passing dishes, pretending a 6-year-old hadn't just dropped a grenade at the table. I knelt beside Naomi, my palms suddenly damp. "Sweetheart, does something hurt right now?" She nodded, tears glassy but silent. My pulse rattled in my ears. "We're going to the bathroom, okay?" I murmured. Nobody offered help. Plates clinked. Someone blessed the cranberry sauce. I guided Naomi down the hallway, feeling every stair prick my back like tacks. Behind the locked door, the smell of lavender soap failed to mask my fear. Naomi flinched when I helped her step out of her tights. There, along the crease of tender skin, I saw redness no child earns on a playground. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I'd spent 2 years volunteering at a women's shelter. I knew this color, this flinch. Knowing didn't make it easier when it was my own child. Naomi's eyes searched mine. "Did I do something bad?" "No, baby. You did nothing wrong." I pulled her close, counting her breaths until mine steadied. Back in the hallway, I met Mama's glare. "Is this necessary?" she hissed. "Dinner's getting cold." "Naomi isn't well. We're stepping out," I said, voice too calm even for me. Callista rolled her eyes so hard I worried they'd stick. Marcus smirked and sipped his wine. I tucked Naomi into the guest room, handing her the raccoon. "Squeeze him if you get scared. I'll be right outside." She nodded, cheeks blazing with shame a child shouldn't own. The night air bit as I stepped onto the porch. My hand shook dialing, but I forced myself not to cry. Dispatchers need clarity, not tears. When the operator answered, words tasted like rust. "Please send someone," I managed, staring at the golden rectangle of dining room light where my family laughed without us. "I think something's been happening to my daughter." My plea to the dispatcher still rang in my ears when the rumble of engines broke the quiet street. Blue strobes bounced off Mama's shutters like restless fireflies. I stood on the porch gripping my elbows, coatless against the November chill, refusing to step back inside until help crossed that threshold. The first cruiser eased to the curb, followed by an ambulance. 2 officers climbed the steps, hats in hand, scanning the house as though danger might leap from the rose bushes. A female EMT hoisted a red bag over her shoulder and met my gaze. I nodded toward the door. She understood without words. Mama yanked it open before anyone could knock. Her eyebrows shot up. "Did someone pass out? Sylvia, what have you done?" I could barely muster a whisper. "My daughter needs a medical exam. She's in the guest room." Mama's mouth twitched, caught between confusion and irritation, but she stepped aside. The smell of turkey and sage slapped us all as we filed in. The living room erupted the moment uniforms appeared. Callista hurried over, heels clicking on hardwood. "You're making a scene," she hissed, jaw so tight it trembled. Behind her, Marcus shook his head like a disappointed coach. "See what happens when unstable people become parents?" he muttered to no one in particular. I stared straight through him, refusing to let the insult land. The EMT knelt beside Naomi, who sat cross-legged on the bed hugging her raccoon. She spoke softly, asked permission to check. Naomi bit her lip, nodded. They disappeared into the adjoining bathroom while an officer waited outside, arms folded. In the hall, relatives formed a half circle, peppering me with questions. Is she sick? Did she fall? Is this about her acting up at supper? I answered none. My eyes stayed on that narrow door, willing it to open, dreading it would. Minutes lengthened. The bedroom clock ticked so loud it felt accusatory. At last the EMT emerged, face drained of color. She motioned me toward the kitchen away from the crowd. Her voice was barely more than breath. She confirmed there's been touching, repeatedly. She glanced over her shoulder. Your daughter named someone. My knees threatened to fold, but I braced against the counter. Who? A pause. Your brother-in-law. The world tilted, then righted itself into a colder version. Rage flashed so hot my vision pinpricked. I inhaled until my ribs hurt, forced myself to stay upright. Thank you, I managed. Please stay with her. When the officers turned toward Marcus, chaos bloomed. Mama stepped between them. This is ridiculous. Marcus would never. Callista clawed at my sleeve. You're tearing this family apart. Marcus put on his best wounded expression. I didn't do anything. The kid's confused. The tallest officer remained calm, reading rights over the commotion. Cuffs clicked, metal against bone, an unforgiving sound. Grandma Vera covered her mouth, eyes wide. Cousin June started crying. Through it all, Naomi peeked from the bedroom door, cheeks blotched pink. I hurried to her, kneeling so we were level. You did the right thing, I murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Mommy believes you. You're safe now. Her fingers curled into my palm. I was scared to tell. I know, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. But you're not alone anymore. Marcus was guided down the hallway, wrists bound. As the door opened, cold air whooshed in, scattering the smell of Thanksgiving. He shot me a final glare, part threat, part plea, before the officers led him into the flashing night. Mama followed to the jam, hand gripping the frame. She didn't look at her son-in-law. She stared at me. Voice low, each word chipped from ice. I'll never forgive you for this. Mama's promise of everlasting resentment was still echoing behind the storm door when the patrol car rolled away. I didn't answer her glare. I focused on buckling Naomi into the back seat of the ambulance for the short ride to the children's hospital. An EMT handed me a pamphlet on traumatic response, but the paper trembled so badly in my grasp, the words blurred. By the time I gave a statement at the precinct and returned to our duplex, dawn had salted the sky. 7 days have limped past since that night. No one from the family has called, texted, or even clicked a sad emoji on my social media post explaining Naomi's absence from school. Mama's number shows up as blocked when I dial. Callista's voicemail is full. Pastor Jenkins left a single syrupy message about letting grace do its work, then suggested I stop attending women's group until the dust settled. Dust, as though my daughter's pain were just a film to wipe from a shelf. Inside our little rental, the silence isn't peaceful, it paces. The refrigerator hum buzzes louder, floors creak more often. Some mornings I find myself checking locks twice, then again before waking Naomi for school. She still crawls into my bed at night, fingers hooking my sleeve as though I might slip away. When I ask whether she dreams, she only shrugs. On Tuesday, she sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, eyeing the wooden chair like a dog eyes a trap. "Is it okay to sit now?" she whispered. I forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Here, I'll put a pillow." She perched like a sparrow, shoulders stiff, and devoured her cereal without looking up. Wednesday, halfway through paperwork at my office, the phone rang. Caller ID read, Harmony Elementary. My pulse hiccuped. "Ms. Duncan, this is Mrs. Vera, Naomi's teacher. Nothing urgent. She's fine, but I'd appreciate if you could come in this afternoon." Her voice carried an undercurrent, the tone professionals use when they're afraid of scaring you. It's about a drawing Naomi made during center time. I believe it relates to what happened. The rest of the workday dragged like wet denim. At 3:30, I parked outside the school, lungs too tight for October air. Walking the corridor, I passed tack boards covered in stick turkeys and I'm thankful for lists. Normal childhood. For a sliver of a second, I envied those parents whose biggest fear was gluten in the cafeteria. Mrs. Vera greeted me at her desk, lips pressed thin. Beside her lay a sheet of red construction paper. She slid it forward. "Naomi told me I could show you." Crayon strokes carved a chair, my mother's antique dining chair, but Naomi had drawn spikes jutting from the seat, crimson lines dripping down. Above it, a stick girl sobbed enormous blue tears. Off to the side loomed a dark scribble with teeth. My throat shrank. She said this is Grandma's chair?" "Exact words," Mrs. Vera murmured, "and that it hurt." She folded her hands. "I'm mandated to report. The counselor has already phoned Child Protective Services." Guilt slammed me so hard I gripped the edge of the desk. How many Thanksgiving dinners had I praised Naomi for sitting nicely while that cursed chair branded itself into her memory? I forced steady breathing, thanked the teacher, and promised cooperation. CPS rang that evening. Polite but practiced, the caseworker requested copies of medical notes and the existing police file. I complied, emailing scans between bites of reheated mac and cheese. While the files uploaded, Naomi colored silently beside me. I noticed a photo album open on the coffee table. Mama's Christmas party last year. Naomi had stuck a neon sticker over Uncle Ben's face, the bachelor brother who always brought magic tricks and extra candy. Something in my stomach folded. Bedtime arrived. I read Goodnight Moon, added an extra verse from her favorite hymn, and tucked the quilt around her shoulders. Candlelight from the nightlight painted soft ovals on the wall. I stroked her hair until her eyelids drooped. "Mommy?" She spoke so faintly I almost missed it. "Yes, baby?" "You promised I never have to go back there." "I meant it. Never again." She nodded, lashes trembling. Then, just before sleep carried her off, she murmured, "There's something I didn't tell you yet about the game he played with me." My heart lurched. "We can talk in the morning, okay?" She managed a tiny yes, already drifting. I kissed her forehead, tasting salt that might have been hers or mine. As I closed the door, the furnace kicked on, rattling the vents like distant footsteps. I stood in the hallway hugging myself, ears ringing with that single word, game, and knew the fight was nowhere near over. Naomi's confession lingered in the room like smoke long after she slipped into dreams. I sat on the edge of the mattress, counting the rise and fall of her chest until the rhythm steadied. Only then did I gather her drawings, shut off the lamp, and retreat to the living room where the night felt too big. She woke again near midnight, padding down the hall in sock feet. "I can't sleep unless you hold me," she whispered. I carried her back, settled into the rocking chair, and wrapped a quilt around us both. That was when the words came, soft as moth wings. "Uncle Marcus liked the quiet game," she began. "If I sat very still and didn't make a sound, he said I was a winner." I kept my voice level. "What happened if you moved?" "He'd press my legs down. Sometimes he pinched, and if I cried, I had to start over." Her small fingers twisted the edge of the quilt. "He said good girls don't fidget." My stomach flipped. Horizontal stripes of moonlight crawled across the floorboards. "Did anyone else know about this game?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Grandma saw once. She said I was being difficult." When Naomi finally drifted off, the adrenaline I'd banked in my muscles had nowhere to go. I stole to the bathroom, closed the door, and let the sobs break free into a hand towel. Scenes replayed. Me in the kitchen refilling tea. Marcus in the dining room entertaining the kids. How many times had I laughed from the stove while my child counted silent seconds to survive? Guilt tasted like copper. Dawn found me at the table drafting notes for the caseworker. At 8 sharp, I called her direct line. My voice shook only once. "Naomi disclosed additional abuse last night, details and frequency." On the other end, Julie's tone sharpened. "We'll schedule a forensic interview this afternoon. Can you have her at Riverstone Advocacy by 2? She paused. "Given the escalation, we may arrange emergency protective measures for both of you." I thanked her, hung up, and exhaled through clenched teeth. The battle line had moved closer. Riverstone was a renovated ranch house painted calming teal. Toys lined the waiting room, but Naomi ignored them, choosing instead to braid and unbraid her raccoon's tail. Through a one-way mirror, I watched the interview begin. The therapist introduced herself, offered a juice box, then asked about games Naomi played with family. My daughter's voice floated through speakers, clear, matter-of-fact, heartbreakingly polite. She described the red chair, the spikes she imagined after it hurt her, the rule of silence. "Marcus said if I told, Mommy would get taken away," she explained, as though reciting spelling words. Each sentence drove a nail. At one point, she lifted her dress hem to show faint bruises the ER had missed. The therapist's eyes shone, yet she maintained a steady murmur of reassurance. 40 minutes later, the session ended. Julie met me in a side office, documents in hand. "We're opening a formal investigation into Marcus. A temporary restraining order will be filed today." She tapped the papers. "Naomi qualifies for trauma-focused counseling. You'll receive a schedule." Gratitude and dread tangled inside me. I signed where she indicated, printing my name with deliberate strokes so no one could claim I hesitated. Leaving the center, the autumn sun felt too bright, cars too loud. I buckled Naomi in, then slid behind the wheel, fingers tight around the leather. In the rearview mirror, my face looked older than a week ago, paler but carved from something harder than fear. I whispered to that reflection. They counted on my silence. They forgot who taught me to survive. Back home, I opened my contacts, scrolling until I found Lauren Pierce, an attorney I met volunteering at the shelter. My thumb hovered over the message icon. Before I could type, a new text lit the screen. It was from Callista. "Stop this, or we'll take her from you." The text sat on my screen like a stone in my stomach. "Stop this, or we'll take her from you." My own sister. The same woman who once cried in my arms and said, "If anything ever happens to me, you'll be like Naomi's second mom." Now she was threatening me, using lawyers and custody like weapons. My fingers clenched around the phone, not because I was afraid, but because I was furious at the cowardice, the silence, the way family turns on truth when it gets inconvenient. I didn't respond. I couldn't, not yet. I just sat there in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, Naomi still curled up in the guest room, sleeping like the child she deserved to be. I glanced at the photo taped to my fridge. Naomi at age 2, frosting all over her cheeks, my arm wrapped around her like a shield. I remembered that day. I remembered everything. And I remembered the beginning. The day Naomi was born, I was there. I had rushed to the hospital straight from work, still in scrubs and sneakers. My sister was exhausted, drugged and pale, barely able to keep her eyes open. I had held Naomi first, tiny, pink, a soft wail escaping those brand new lungs. My sister had reached out and touched my arm. "She's yours too," she murmured. "Promise me. If I ever lose myself, you'll be her anchor." I promised. God help me, I meant it. That promise echoed in my head as I sat in the car outside Ana Ramirez's law office the next morning. Ana and I hadn't spoken in years, but she'd been my college roommate, and she had a reputation for fighting like hell when it mattered. I texted her the night before. By morning, she had cleared a slot for me. Inside, Ana didn't waste time on small talk. She offered coffee, which I declined, then sat across from me in a quiet, clean office lined with casebooks and framed degrees. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. Every whisper, every drawing, every red flag I'd ignored, and every time I'd let my sister's words override my instincts. When I showed her the message, the threat, Ana's face went still. "They're testing you," she said quietly. "That's what people like this do. Push to see if you'll break." I looked her in the eye. "I'm not breaking." Ana nodded once. "Good, because this next part gets messy." She explained the legal landscape, how I wasn't Naomi's legal guardian, how technically my sister still had full parental rights. If she filed for custody, if she painted this as a family misunderstanding, she might sway the court. But Ana's voice grew sharper as she added, "If Naomi's in danger, and you've documented every step, we can push for emergency guardianship. It's not easy, but it's possible." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. What about the rest of the family? If they side with her, "They will," Ana said bluntly. "At first, until the truth gets louder." Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my sister. "Lunch tomorrow? Just us. Let's talk like grown women." Ana narrowed her eyes. "That's not a peace offering. That's a trap." "I know," I said, "but I'm going." The next afternoon, I parked outside a neutral cafe halfway between our houses. Bright, cheerful place, booths lined the walls, easy to hear, impossible to yell. My sister was already inside, sipping tea like we were just two old friends catching up. "Sylvie," she smiled, rising to hug me. I didn't move. She sat back down, pretending not to notice the cold air between us. "I just want to clear the air," she began. "Naomi's confused. You know how kids are, imagination and all that. She's always been sensitive." I didn't speak. She sighed, soft and motherly. "I don't want to ruin our family over this. We've always had each other, haven't we?" Then she reached into her purse and slid a thin manila envelope across the table. "What's this?" I asked, though I already had a sick feeling in my gut. "Just something to consider," she said lightly. "A compromise." I opened it. Inside was a draft custody filing, her intent to regain Naomi. Alongside it, a mutual silence agreement. If I dropped the claims and backed off, they wouldn't pursue legal action. I stared at the papers, every word a slap. "You're trying to trade her trauma for your reputation," I said flatly. She blinked. "Sylvia, don't be dramatic. This is about keeping the peace." I looked her straight in the eye. Is that what he called it too? Keeping the peace while she played that sick game? Her lips tightened. "You're making this worse. If you keep going, we'll fight back. And we'll win." I placed the envelope gently on the table. "No," I said softly. "You've already lost her. The question is, what else are you willing to lose?" I didn't wait for a reaction. I left that envelope sitting on the table between us like a bomb with the pin pulled and walked out of the cafe without another word. Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at my coat. I welcomed the chill. It helped me stay upright, helped me fight back the nausea curling in my stomach. The next morning, Naomi barely spoke. She sat at the kitchen table, her cereal soggy, untouched. I tried asking about math class, about the art club she used to love, but all I got was a faint nod or a tight little shrug. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Something was slipping again. I could feel it in the way she clutched her backpack with both hands like a shield. The spark that had begun to flicker back after the CPS visit. It was dimming. After she left for school, I tidied up the kitchen, then moved on to the living room. Her bag had been left by the door unzipped. I reached down to close it and noticed something wedged between two worn spiral notebooks. A thick, crumpled paper, balled up like it had been hidden in a hurry. I sat down, flattening it across the table. It was a drawing, crude but deliberate. A little girl sat alone on a bench, her knees apart, red crayon lines drawn in jagged streaks across the area between her waist and her legs. Behind her loomed a taller figure, stick-like, with broad shoulders and a face labeled in uneven handwriting, Uncle R. Off to the side were two more stick people, both facing away. Mom. Grandma. They were watching, and doing nothing. My breath caught. The paper trembled in my hands. For a long moment, I just sat there, unable to move, unable to think. Then I heard footsteps. Naomi was back. She'd forgotten her lunchbox. She froze in the doorway. Her eyes flicked to the paper in front of me, then to my face. And then she crumpled. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, voice high and shaking. "I didn't mean to draw it. I didn't know how else to say it." I went to her without a word, wrapping my arms around her small frame. Her tears soaked into my shirt. "You don't ever have to be sorry," I whispered into her hair. "You are brave. And you're not alone. I promise you. I believe you. I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, I picked her up from school early. I walked into the front office and asked to see the counselor, Ms. Wheeler, a calm woman in her early 50s with a deep crease between her brows that only got deeper as I handed her the drawing. Naomi sat next to me, quiet but alert. Ms. Wheeler adjusted her glasses and studied the paper. Her mouth parted slightly, then closed again. She looked at Naomi. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "did you draw this?" Naomi nodded. Ms. Wheeler didn't say anything else. She simply got up, locked the office door, and returned to her seat. "This is going up the chain. Now." Within the hour, the school filed an additional report with CPS. I sat in the hallway outside the counselor's office while the school principal, Mr. Calder, a soft-spoken man I'd barely met, came down and shook my hand. "Ms. Taylor," he said, "whatever you need from us, we'll stand with Naomi. Just tell us how to help." It was the first time since this all began that someone outside my walls had said those words. We drove home in near silence. Naomi stared out the window, her thumb pressed to her lips like a reflex from a younger time. I didn't push her. I just kept one hand on the wheel and the other lightly resting on her knee. Dinner was quiet, just soup and crackers. She didn't say much, but she ate. That alone felt like a small victory. I was rinsing dishes when I heard her footsteps again, soft and unsure. She stood in the doorway to my bedroom. Her voice was barely louder than a breath. "Can I sleep with you tonight?" I nodded, pulled back the covers, and let her curl beside me. Her small hands gripped the fabric near my shoulder. The room was dark, just the faint hum of the heater and the rhythm of our breathing. Then, in a voice so faint I almost missed it, she asked, "Do you think they'll believe me this time?" I turned toward her, smoothing her hair. But I didn't answer right away. Because in that moment, I finally understood. Naomi wasn't just scared. She was tired. I didn't sleep much that night. Naomi curled up next to me, her little hand wrapped around my wrist like I might disappear if she let go. Her whisper, still ringing in my head, "Do you think they'll believe me this time?" cut deeper than anything I'd heard in a courtroom. I lay awake long after her breathing slowed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many nights she had spent like this before she finally spoke. The next morning I was in the kitchen making eggs when my phone vibrated on the counter. "Ms. Green?" It was the school counselor's voice, low, careful. "I think you need to come in. Naomi left her school tablet in the reading nook yesterday, and when I opened it to charge it, there was a recording. It sounds like it started by accident, or maybe not. Either way, I think you'll want to hear it." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. My chest clenched. I told her I'd be there in 20. I dropped Naomi off at school myself, kissed her forehead, and promised her I'd see her later. She didn't smile, but her eyes held something different this morning. Not relief, just a quiet kind of watching, like she was measuring the world one reaction at a time. As soon as I was alone in the car, I parked behind the school library, rolled up the windows, and powered on the tablet the counselor had left for me. I opened the file. For the first few seconds, there was only faint static, the sound of sheets shifting, distant footsteps. Then came the voices. "I told you," a woman said, sharp, tired. "Don't let her say too much at school." Another voice followed, older, clipped, and colder. "She needs to learn. If she keeps flapping her mouth about that man, he'll end up in jail. And then we all lose." I knew those voices. Naomi's mother, her grandmother. I didn't even realize I'd gripped the steering wheel until I felt the ache in my knuckles. Then, softly, Naomi's little voice broke through. "But it hurts." A pause. Then her mother snapped, "Then maybe stop acting like a brat." The next sound wasn't words, it was the unmistakable crack of skin meeting skin. Then her voice, small and breaking, "Mommy, please don't let him—" The rest was muffled crying. A rustle. Then nothing but silence. I stared straight ahead, frozen in place. I couldn't feel my legs. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the tablet. I sat there for nearly 10 minutes before I remembered to breathe. Then I did what any woman who'd lived through a courtroom war zone would do. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. I let the tablet replay, word for word, into the speaker. No enhancements, no editing, just the raw truth. Then I called Marcia Doyle, a legal advocate I'd worked with back when I volunteered on domestic violence cases. She answered on the third ring. "Sylvia? It's been a minute. Everything okay?" "No," I said, flat. "I have a minor under my care. I have a recording. It includes emotional abuse, physical harm, and evidence of coercion to protect a sexual abuser. I need to know what's possible right now." There was no hesitation in her voice. "Bring me the audio. We can file an emergency petition for protective custody. That's enough for a judge to issue a restraining order. I'll prep the papers." "I'm going to court," I told her, staring out through the windshield. "I'm going to fight like hell." By the time I got home, Naomi was already there. School had let out early for a staff meeting. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her pencils scattered across the surface, working quietly. When she saw me walk in, she slid a piece of paper across the table and looked up, searching my face for something. Maybe permission, maybe safety. It was a drawing, another one. This time it wasn't scary. It was her, standing tall in front of a shadowy figure with red eyes. In one hand she held a shield. On the shield, in blocky handwriting, she'd written, "Aunt Sylvia." I knelt beside her, rested my forehead against hers, and said quietly, "This time, no one's going to silence you." That night, I stayed up printing forms, sorting evidence, organizing notes. Naomi fell asleep on the couch with her drawing in her lap. I carried her to bed, tucked her in gently, and left the hallway light on. When morning came, we were out the door before the sun crested the trees. As I pulled onto the road toward the courthouse, Naomi reached across the console. Her fingers found my pinky. She wrapped hers around it and held on. Then, almost too softly to hear, she whispered, "Is this what bravery feels like?" I looked over at her, and for the first time, I let the tears come. Naomi's question still clung to the windshield fog as we eased into the courthouse lot. I squeezed her pinky back. "Bravery feels like breathing when the air is thin, but we'll breathe together." She managed a small nod. The blue cardigan I'd laid out for her buttoned all the way to the collar. Inside, the marble floors echoed every step. I could tell she heard it too, every click another reminder of how large this building was, how tiny she must feel. I knelt, straightened her hair clip. "Truth isn't rude," I whispered. "It's just loud enough to be heard." She pressed her lips together and followed me past the metal detector. Judge Harrell's courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old paper. We took our place at the petitioner's table. Marcia slid a reassuring glance my way. Naomi's mother swept in next, heels puncturing the hush. Beside her, Grandma in a charcoal suit, and trailing them a man I'd never seen. Gray blazer, stiff smile, leather briefcase. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Green, you're requesting emergency guardianship. Ms. Rollins, you filed a counterpetition for a full custody evaluation and provided expert testimony?" He looked at the stranger. Naomi's mother rose. "Yes, Your Honor. We've brought Dr. Randall Kane, licensed therapist, to address concerns about Sylvia's mental stability and the possibility she's influencing the child." My sister's lawyer slid a document forward. The words "obsessive savior complex" were bolded. I felt Marcia's elbow nudge mine. "Stay calm." Dr. Kane took the stand. His voice oozed certainty. "I have reviewed Ms. Duncan's social media posts, volunteer history, and recent behavior. Patterns indicate a fixation on rescuing others, often projecting unresolved trauma." He shuffled papers theatrically. "Children in her care may adopt these narratives." I kept my face neutral, but inside a fuse hissed. Marcia scribbled on a legal pad, not licensed in Kentucky, and slid it beneath my fingertips. When it was our turn, Marcia stood. "Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A." She played the recording from Naomi's tablet. The room fell into a vacuum. Naomi's small voice trembled. "But it hurts." Then the cold reply from her mother, the slap, the whimper. Somewhere behind me a chair creaked and stopped. Judge Harrell's jaw set. Marcia continued, "Exhibit B. Disciplinary documentation from the Nevada Board of Behavioral Health. Dr. Kane was reprimanded and his license suspended for unethical diagnoses." She turned, meeting his eyes. "Sir, are you currently licensed in this state?" Kane's mouth opened, closed. My application is pending." "Thank you," Marcia said. "No further questions." The judge tapped his gavel once. "I've heard enough. Temporary emergency custody is granted to Sylvia Duncan effective immediately. A criminal investigation into Marcus Rollins remains active. Furthermore, the court issues a no-contact order against Ms. Rollins and Mrs. Green pending review." My sister's lips parted, stunned silence replacing practiced calm. Grandma reached for her arm, but she pulled away, eyes burning. Outside the courtroom, sunlight spilled through tall windows. Naomi climbed onto the bench beside me, leaning into my side. Reporters loitered at the security desk, but no one approached. For a rare moment, the hallway felt private. She tucked her head under my chin. "Can I go home now?" she asked, voice small but steady. I kissed her hair. "We're building a new one, just for you." Naomi's question lingered as we left the courthouse, her head on my shoulder, the afternoon sun warming the marble steps. 2 weeks later, that moment still glows in my memory like a porch light guiding us home. The new rental is small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, but every wall has fresh paint and every door swings open without a key. Each morning I wake to the smell of maple syrup and the slap of Naomi's bare feet on hardwood. She lines her sneakers by the welcome mat, lace bows neatly double-knotted. It's the first thing she does when she comes inside, proof she no longer expects to be whisked away without warning. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays we drive to art therapy. On the off days, she attends school half-time, easing back into spelling tests and jungle gym politics. Evenings we plant seeds in the backyard, basil, marigolds, 3 tiny sunflower starts. She says the flowers make the fence look happier. One quiet Thursday, she emerges from her room holding a sheet of thick paper. Numbers scrawl across the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, like a list. Beside each number is a stick figure. The first is me, hair scribbled in brown loops. The second is her, smiling. The third is Grandpa, gray curls, guitar in hand. The fourth figure stands apart, a rectangle drawn around him like a shadow box. Sharp eyebrows, an angry mouth labeled Uncle Ben. I freeze. Uncle Ben, my sister's bachelor brother, hadn't crossed my mind since last Christmas, when he performed magic tricks with coins behind Naomi's ear. He was never in the initial reports, never on the CPS radar. "Honey," I ask, keeping my voice steady, "why is Uncle Ben in a box?" Her eyes drop. "That's my room at Grandma's. He used to come in after the game." She watches me, measuring my reaction. I didn't want to make trouble. A slow throb starts behind my temples. I snap a quick photo of the drawing and email it to Detective Loring before the tremor in my hands spreads. He calls within minutes, voice clipped. "We missed him. I'm sending a team to interview other children who attended those family dinners." 5 days later, Loring rings again. Uncle Ben is in custody, charged after 2 other minors corroborate Naomi's description. My sister's statement? She knew something felt off, but didn't press him because family comes first. That night, I find Naomi on the patio, watering the sunflower starts with a plastic jug. She hums under her breath, off-key, fearless. I sit beside the planter box and watch soil darken beneath the trickling water. "They grow slow," she tells me, toes wiggling in fresh dirt. "But they're big when they're ready." I tug the brim of her straw hat. "Just like you." The mailbox squeaks the next day. Inside, a cream envelope addressed in my mother's handwriting. My pulse flutters as I tear it open. "Sylvia, I was wrong. I wanted to believe the stories were lies because the truth hurt more. I will testify. I'm sorry I let silence speak for me." Mom. I read it aloud at the kitchen table while Naomi colors a castle. When I finish, she sets down her crayon. "I want to stay here," she says simply. I smooth the letter flat. "You will." Later, after dishes are stacked and the nightlight glows, Naomi crawls onto the couch beside me. We share banana pancakes left over from breakfast, her idea of dessert. She leans her head on my arm and sighs, a sound so light it floats. I think back to every siren, every slammed door, every sleepless night counting her breaths. I used to believe rescue was dramatic. Flashers, lawyers, a single decisive moment. But real rescue is quieter, a child sleeping through the night, a shoe rack by the door, pancakes for dinner because nobody's timing the meal. Naomi yawns, pushing her plate aside. "Does this mean I'm safe now?" I pull the knitted blanket over us both and kiss the top of her head. "No, baby," I say, heartbeat thrumming with something that finally feels like peace. "It means you're home."